Impression versus assent. Imagine you're walking through a busy marketplace on a warm afternoon. A stranger approaches you with an urgent expression, claiming they recognize you from somewhere important. Your mind instantly begins to race with possibilities. Perhaps they're right. Perhaps they're mistaken. Perhaps there's danger. Perhaps there's opportunity. In that moment, between their words reaching your ears and your decision about what to believe, something profound occurs that the ancient Stoics understood with remarkable clarity. What if the difference between peace and turmoil, wisdom and folly, lies not in what happens to you, but in this razor-thin moment of choice that most people never even notice? The Stoics discovered something remarkable about the human mind. There's a fundamental difference between receiving an impression and giving it your assent. An impression is automatic. It arrives uninvited like a knock at your door. Assent, however, is entirely voluntary. It's your conscious choice to open that door and invite the visitor inside. This distinction seems simple enough, yet it contains one of the most liberating paradoxes in all of philosophy. You are simultaneously powerless over what your mind presents to you and completely powerful over what you choose to accept. Every moment of your waking life, impressions flood your consciousness like waves against a shore. Someone cuts you off in traffic, and immediately the impression arises: they disrespected me. Your phone buzzes with a delayed response from a friend, and another impression appears: they must be angry with me. You glance in a mirror and notice a new line on your face: I'm getting old and losing my appeal. These impressions arrive with such speed and seeming authority that most people never realize they have a choice in the matter. But here's where the Stoic insight becomes revolutionary. Between the impression and your emotional response lies a moment of freedom so brief, yet so powerful, that mastering it can transform your entire experience of being human. The impression they disrespected me is just that: an impression, a mental event, no more inherently true than a cloud is inherently permanent. You can observe it, acknowledge it, and then choose whether or not to agree with it. Consider how this works in your own experience. When you're well rested and content, you might receive an impression that your colleague's curt email means they're having a difficult day. When you're stressed and vulnerable, the same email might create the impression that they're deliberately undermining you. The external facts haven't changed. Only your internal state has shifted, revealing how impressions are colored by factors completely unrelated to truth. The ancient Stoics understood that impressions often masquerade as facts, arriving with an urgency that demands immediate belief. They whisper, "This is terrible. You're in danger. You're not good enough. This will ruin everything." But impressions, no matter how vivid or insistent, are simply the mind's initial interpretation of events. They're rough drafts, not final verdicts. This is where the profound freedom of assent reveals itself. You can receive the impression that a setback at work means you're a failure, and simply observe that impression without embracing it. You can notice the thought, "I'll never find love," arising after a disappointing date, and recognize it as one possible interpretation among many. You begin to see that your mind is constantly offering you stories about reality, but you are the editor who decides which stories make it into your final draft of experience. The practice becomes a kind of gentle investigation. When a strong impression arises, you might pause and ask, is this necessarily true? Could there be other explanations? What assumptions am I making? This isn't about positive thinking or denial. It's about recognizing that first impressions, no matter how convincing, are often incomplete or distorted versions of reality. What emerges from this practice is a profound shift in how you relate to your own thoughts and emotions. Instead of being at the mercy of every mental event, you begin to develop what the Stoics called the discipline of assent, a spacious awareness that can hold impressions lightly, examining them with kindness, but without automatic agreement. This distinction between impression and assent reveals something beautiful about human consciousness. You are not your thoughts any more than you are the weather outside your window. Thoughts arise and pass away like clouds across the sky of awareness. Some are accurate, some are distorted, some are helpful, some are harmful. But they are all temporary visitors in the space of your mind, and you have the dignity of choice in how you respond to them. The paradox deepens when you realize that the less you struggle against unwanted impressions, the less power they have over you. When you try to suppress the impression, "I'm not good enough," it often intensifies and multiplies. But when you observe it with calm curiosity, "Ah, there's that familiar impression again," it often dissolves on its own, like a wave that breaks and retreats into the ocean. This practice extends far beyond managing negative thoughts. It applies to positive impressions as well. Those moments when your mind insists that external things will bring lasting happiness. The impression might arise that acquiring a certain possession, achieving a particular status, or winning someone's approval will complete you. Here, too, you can pause and examine. Is this necessarily true? From where does this impression arise? In relationships, this distinction becomes especially profound. When someone criticizes you, the immediate impression might be that they're right and you should feel ashamed, or that they're wrong and you should feel angry. But both impressions are simply initial reactions. Upon reflection, you might find that their criticism contains useful feedback without being a complete indictment of your worth. Or you might recognize that their words say more about their own pain than about your character. The Stoics discovered that true freedom isn't the ability to control what happens to you. That's a form of freedom no one possesses. True freedom is the ability to choose your response to what happens to you. And this freedom lives precisely in the space between impression and assent, in that brief moment when you can pause and ask, "What do I choose to believe about this situation?" As you settle into sleep tonight, you might notice impressions arising about the day just past or the day to come. Perhaps there's an impression that you didn't accomplish enough, or worry about challenges ahead, or satisfaction about something that went well. You can observe these impressions like gentle visitors, acknowledging their presence without necessarily inviting them to stay for dinner. This isn't about achieving some impossible state where impressions no longer arise. That would be like trying to stop the ocean from producing waves. It's about developing a different relationship with the inevitable movements of your mind, recognizing that you have more choice than you might have imagined in what you accept as true about yourself and your life. The freedom has been there all along, waiting quietly in the space between what appears in your awareness and what you choose to believe about it.